All right, everyone. We're going to be joined by Natalie Martinick here. The Narcissism of Psychotherapy. If the title intrigues you, there we go. Hey, good to be here.
Hi, Jeremy. So, what are we going to talk about?
So, as the topic on the live suggests, I've really been inspired, and I would encourage everybody watching and listening to also be inspired and checking out your articles about saviorism and narcissism in the helping professions and activism not being therapy. So that really hit me as a crucial topic. It's very timely. It's something I get up in arms about because insurance is paying for individual psychotherapy that helps people, and it's not paying for a lot of it shouldn't be paying for what gets kind of Trojan horsed in. And the fact that you've written so proficiently and prolifically on it, really, I'm like, I got to have her on to talk about it. And the other thing, yeah, and I made notes of all the other stuff you wanted to talk about as well. But for to let the viewers know, like, when we met on Clubhouse, you did a lot of really awesome rooms about institutional narcissism and what it looks like on the job and how you can be pulled into these dynamics where you are giving someone supply. And you took that and really applied it to the psychotherapy saviorism stuff. So I would love to just start out, if you're comfortable, talking about what inspired you to write about saviorism and narcissism in the helping profession and what you think it's important for people to know about that. And I'm just stop talking.
Yeah. Um, so, I like to draw on my own personal experiences and reflections of my own behavior. And I'm a hopefully recovered savior. I used to be that person when someone had a problem, I would go and instantly try to fix it for them. And while that makes me feel good and maybe them feeling okay about it because their pain or suffering is being alleviated, well, allegedly, they don't actually get to experience discovering, gaining insight about themselves so that they can apply that to make a change in their life. I'm the one jumping in and saving the day. So
Yeah.
I had to get over my hero complex. And then, of course, once you discover it in yourself a little bit more, you start to notice it everywhere around you. And as a former scientist, again, it followed us, our funding is kind of a savior model. Yes, we can say we're investigating diseases and wanting to eradicate them, but there's some saviorism in that because it's like based on the methods we're using, we're going to come to save the day. So, and we're not necessarily talking, not in my research, talking to patients and, learning from their experience. And then how do we support them to enhance some skills and things to be able to better look after themselves? There are people doing that, but that wasn't what I was experiencing in my research. So there's a saviorism there, saviorism everywhere. Look at marketing, and advertising. I mean, the whole industry is about manufacturing problems, so that they could sell you things that you need to solve the problems that weren't really problems to begin with, So there's lots of, and of course I'm generalizing and it's not all bad, but anyway, this is the sort of environment we're in. So it is very disempowering for people because it can create dependency that if you have somebody or something coming to save the day, then you don't have to ever take responsibility. So you can wallow in your victimhood. So when they don't fulfill your expectations, then you could blame them. It's so convenient. And so saviorism is a problem, and it's also threatening because a lot of people come in as the savior in a workplace or in a group because they see something wrong and they want to raise awareness of the problem and then try to fix it. But sometimes they don't do the raising awareness bit and getting some buy-in. They just jump in and initiate the activities to bring about change, which threatens the status quo. And then it brings about problems that, then they're scapegoated and all that stuff that you see everywhere. And so who's to blame there? Is it the scapegoater, or is it the person who had the arrogance to believe that they had what was needed to fix everything? So there's the sort of narcissism embedded in that I know best. My way is the right way, your way is the wrong way, and I'm going to go about, saving the day. So, that's just a little blah of what drove me to think about and investigate saviorism a little more. And seeing it also in the therapy space, the helping professional space, as activism has become more, what's the word, sexy,
Yeah.
it's trendy. We all need to fight for something. Social justice. I'm cool now. So these are the things I have to do. These are the things I have to believe and fight for. And so I'm going to bring this into my professional practice, even though that wasn't anything that was involved in my training. There's no rigor, evidence-based rigor behind it. It's just what I think is required because we know about systemic oppression. So of course, we need to bring it into all of our work because they're oppressed and they don't know it and they need to know it. And I have the way that will fix things for them.
Yeah, I think one thing we have to do to call out my field, because, as a therapist, I can and should do that. We have to focus on what's actually evidence-based and what's being paid for in psychotherapy sessions. Like, you can be a doctor, and if a patient comes in for medication and you lecture them on systemic oppression and they leave without steroids for their sinus infection, like, what did you offer? Like, likewise, if a client has depression and anxiety and they're leaving with just some platitudes and topics about deconstructing oppression, awesome. And what about EMDR therapy for trauma? What about trauma-focused CBT? What about acceptance therapy? Like, we can't lose that. And so the cynical, I'll be nice and say skeptical side of me says, well, to actually use an evidence-based practice, you have to get good at that. And there's quite a bit of, practice and rigor involved in that versus giving people platitudes. And I wonder how much that plays into it. Not to be rude, but just straight up laziness.
Yeah. Taking your training, putting in the back seat so that you can bring out your saviorism and your ideology and get on your high horse about. That's the word my husband uses to describe me sometimes. Oh, you're on a high horse again. Yes. To almost talk down to the patient and that you know better about what they need than they do. Yeah. It's not a good experience, but some patients don't see that. Some people on the receiving end think they're getting a good deal because, of course, why would I want to be oppressed? You're right. I didn't realize this before. So thank you. But yeah, you didn't actually give me what I needed.
No, I mean, and so I think there's different emphases within graduate programs. I think some are more into actual methods, and I think some are into more ideology. And again, ideology, I like that you said that. Saviorism is sexy. I mean, everybody wants to be on the hero's journey. And the thing is a therapist, though, let's not get it twisted. You're not really the hero. Now, what you can do is iterate and create. I mean, reverse that. Create and iterate an amazing psychotherapy. And then your client's the main character, but you certainly aren't supposed to cast yourself as this great savior that liberates your clients because you're infantilizing them. And I see a lot of Substack articles and authors now that address this idea of people being really infantilized. And really that kind of segue. For one, I just encourage everybody to read like How to Recognize When Activism is Being Done to You by Helping Professionals. Great article. Loved that. And then also your article about your feelings don't have to be validated. I think that relates really well, actually, to the helping profession thing. And I'm wondering if you could share more about get on your high horse again, your soapbox too, maybe stand one foot on each, about validation's role and what annoys you about it. Because I love this. This is really good stuff.
Okay, so we're moving from saviorism into one of the skills that a practitioner uses, whether they're a therapist or anyone. Yeah. Validation. So I wrote a piece called "No, Your Feelings Don't Need to Be Validated," and it got a lot of mixed reviews. People who really love it and resonate it, people who are challenged by it, but it opened their thinking, and it got them to reflect on their own practice and come to a new understanding about what they might need to do, which is my favorite type of outcome. That's what I aim for with everything. And then the ones who are just like, how dare you minimize my experience? They took it very personally because obviously I'm describing people like them. So validation is not a bad thing, right? We all need to be validated, especially as children, because we're looking to our adults, our authority figures, to help us understand this world and reality and our, forming links between our feelings, actions, outcomes. We're trying to navigate this world. So we need people to guide us. But as you enter into adulthood, you need that less and less, hopefully, if you've had the right kind of support and guidance and responsive parenting. But yet there's a subset of people who feel, and I'm not talking about people who are, neuroatypical or have some sort of, intellectual disability. I'm talking about everyone who is able to operate and function in this world and meet their needs. There's an expectation that at some point you won't need people to keep affirming your reality and telling you that you're right.
Right.
It kind of would be like, okay, this is my experience. This is how I'm understanding this situation. What are your thoughts about what I've just said? Versus, yeah, you're right. Of course, that's, of course you see it that way.
Right.
Yeah, that's how it is, and moving on. And so there's a place for that sometimes, especially if you've had a shocking incident and, you're not in your body, you're not present, you're trying to grapple with things, you're in shock. You will need someone to just go, yeah, of course you'd be feeling that way. But then that's not the end point. That's not the end point when we're seeking help or support from someone or even a soundboard. We need some other skills to help us start to explore our experience, our thoughts, our feelings, our perceptions, and even to challenge them, to get us thinking, to open up our thinking, to consider other perspectives that can be contributing to my current experience. And I know when I do that, or when I'm on the receiving end of that, I always come to a new place of understanding that actually moves me away from the pain or the struggle or the tension into more relief or peace or acceptance. Isn't that what we want for people? So validation is not bad, but our feelings do not need to be validated. If I'm angry, I don't need someone to say, wow, you're angry. I see that you're really angry right now. Or, of course you feel angry. I don't need that. I'm angry. I know it. I need to offload about what's going on because it's a strong energy. I need to get it out of my system and talk about it and help me to get it out, get that story out. I don't need someone to keep kind of trying to placate me because they're uncomfortable with the expression of my emotion. They're trying to placate me to calm themselves, because being around anger or strong emotions like sadness or grief can be very hard for people to tolerate. So their level of tolerance to certain emotions makes them want to kind of subdue them for me, if I'm the one upset, so that they can feel better. So it's really for them. And I'm not saying they're selfish. Most people don't know that this is happening. They don't know that they're experiencing discomfort with someone else's emotional state, that they're trying to suppress it or almost invalidate it. So they use these, placating practices to, kind of calm that person and move on, but we don't get to explore. So it's dissatisfying, or some forms of validation can be quite condescending or infantilizing. Like, you're talking to me like I'm a child who needs to develop an emotional literacy, instead of talking to me like a peer, an equal, who is just having a big experience and needs someone to help me understand what's going on so I could take action, or at least come to terms with it, accept it. So validation might be an entry point, but no feeling needs to be valid. If I'm feeling something, if you're feeling something, it's valid. I don't need someone to go, yeah, it's okay that you feel that way. It's okay to not be okay. Shut up. I need that. That's not helping me. But that's me and my like where I'm at. Other people are not in that place. So a lot of people need that. So if we're talking about people who need a kind of narcissistic supply, they need the attention and affection from someone else to help them feel better, but they're not that interested in exploring. They're more interested in maintaining their current narrative of their experience. That way they can keep inviting that level of attention and affection and energy. So it reinforces a certain mindset or a certain narrative that never requires them to change. So they'll always be, say, the victim of their experience of bullying 10 years ago. And then they keep rehashing it and keep getting that supply. So it is a narcissism to need that from people, because you're not asking for change, but you're potentially telling people that you want change. But in the moment, you expect validation. You want your feelings to be centered instead of thoughts, experiences, perceptions. You're not interested in anyone challenging or helping explore it. You just want the attention from the feeling. So that was the essence of that. And that's what I see a lot in the activism as therapist space. They've chucked all their skills out the window and have focused on validating someone's identity or ideology. Maybe they're trying that to build that rapport and trust, but it's not effective in helping people facilitate change.
No, it's not. And I'm concerned about it because I think what we've seen is a trajectory from, so like all medical professionals have added like one more. So what I mean by that is usually you had psychiatrists and psychologists, and then you added counselors. Okay. Now I'm not being mean about that because I'm an LPC. That's my counseling degree. You had doctors and nurses, and now you have medical assistants, MAs. It's another kind of professional. So I think what we have to do is make sure training is really robust. I think that we definitely need grounding in theory. I love psychology theory. Everyone's not going to. But if you look at psychoanalysis, you look at even something like EMDR therapy, and they're very different. They both, though, focus on the importance of desensitizing and saying, okay, so this is what the world did to you, and you have to decide how you notice and make meaning of that and move forward, and don't carry that residue and inflict it on others or view things through that murky lens. You have to wipe off your lenses essentially and move forward. So what you hear about a lot is the sort of self-care, self-indulgent, easy model of validation that really can puff up people who are fragile, narcissists, whatever you want to call it. And I've noticed that is a really big concern because when everybody's right, no one is. And so you have kind of this starting point becoming the end point of validation. If what someone's doing for you in therapy is what you could get over coffee with your girlfriend, I don't think that's therapy. That doesn't really seem to me to be like, why is your insurance paying for that? Not to be too much of a gatekeeper, but kind of in our era, we need some gatekeeping.
Yeah. I would agree with that. Need some rigor. You need to be able to fall back on specific frameworks. That is an evidence-based framework. Whatever the evidence, like I'm very open around evidence, but it needs to have something that you can reflect back on in your practice, because these therapists need to be having reflective or some sort of supervision, reflective practice, so that they don't become the victims of countertransference and all the, bringing their own biases into their practice, or bringing their own childhood stories and reenacting them with their clients. Or if that happens, if that happens, obviously that's part of, I think, psychodynamic, like, you
Translate.
Yes. But I think there's something that you said earlier and it just flew out of my mind that was really good. Really good, really good. Oh, yes. So therapy, helping, is not about necessarily hanging out with someone and letting them offload their feelings and they talk about their story. You might lightly, gently explore it with them, but they're basically offloading, getting it off their chest. And then you're like, oh, I feel better. Thanks for that. But nothing changes. And you are left with the, material that they just kind of dumped on you. And you weren't able to do anything with it that was going to provide a meaningful experience for both of you. Because you should be getting something out of the interaction. It should be meaningful and helping you as the practitioner learn about your practice a little more and what's effective, and, helping someone go from seeing things a certain way to seeing things differently in a way that feels right for them and supports a change, even if it's, uncomfortable. That's satisfying. But just being on the receiving end of someone's talk is, that might be satisfying for some because they're like, I feel useful here, but you're not necessarily effective as a practitioner in helping someone facilitate some sort of change of perception, feeling, mood, even behavior. So that's a huge problem, but that's become central in a lot of therapeutic spaces. I'm providing a safe space so that you could feel seen and heard and understood. Yeah. And then what? We need to stop being so indulgent. Maybe you do that the first time, but if that's the recurring theme of your practice, then you're not a practitioner. You're just indulging somebody so that they like you. They come back to you and they pay you again to feel good around you. But that's not necessarily going to support them to make change. You're doing it for yourself. And I think that's the message that's been lost, that you are a facilitator of change, regardless of the helping profession you're in, even as a friend. I don't just sit there and listen to my friend go on and on and on. They know I'm going to challenge their thinking, because we have the trust, because we have that built in over years, that if I come in to, help gently confront them or challenge them, they're not going to be like, oh my God, I'm so offended. They're going to be, thank you. I haven't thought of it that way, or this is really uncomfortable, but let's go there, because they won't change. So that's the difference. That's the other thing. By talking at somebody and telling them, getting them to consider what the world did to them. Now, it's different if we're talking about someone who had childhood trauma and, adults abused them or neglected them. Then yeah, that's appropriate, because as children, they're completely dependent. They had limited agency. But if we're talking about systemic oppression and racism in our adulthood, or, and this has been done to you. And so I'm giving you permission as the overseeing authority in our therapeutic relationship to feel oppressed and to feel like to be the victim now. That's not helpful, because the person in the scenario had agency. They contributed in some way. And again, I'm not talking about abuse, that's separate, but we're talking about just everyday interaction where someone is feeling shitty about their workplace or certain relationships. You're contributing. You have a part in this. So let's explore the part that you played, not to blame, not to go as your fault, but to consider what might you be doing that is contributing to these outcomes that you don't like, so that we could discover what you can change to get a different experience, a different outcome overall. And this is my role as an effective practitioner, to use my skills, my knowledge, my expertise to facilitate that and investigation with you, as well as supporting you to make changes that are not going to make things worse for you. Or if they will make things worse, because that's what, changing a habit does, then let's make sure we think about or as many of the unintended consequences, and prepare you to respond to them, so that you will feel equipped and confident to be able to handle and not revert back to your default that you're trying to change. So that requires a huge skill set, which I know many people are trained in. But when you're ideologically captured, it becomes all about, professing that ideology and making people realize what you want them to realize that serves you and your weird need for them to feel oppressed and the victim of their circumstances, so that you can now preach at them and call that help.
Mic drop. I love that. Lots to unpack there. I would say, when it comes to validation, you made an amazing counterpoint that reflection is more useful, and that you made me think of in that article of "No, your feelings aren't being validated," of Karkoff's empathic reflecting scale. And there's different levels to that, like CARKHUFF. So I remembered in grad school, we had that scale, and it was basically all the way from 1 up, and like 1 was really not that great and basically detracted from what the content was that someone was saying, the Karkoff empathy scale. And then it goes up, and you essentially take what the person said and you help them understand it even better. And so that's what you're articulating, is actually we need to help people understand what's going on with themselves mentally in a way that can challenge, like you said. But the problem is people get so defensive about that. And I think as therapists, we really have to say on the front end, you're not going to like all of what I have to say, and you're always open to tell me that it didn't hit right and it's a miss. But if you were paying me just to say nice stuff, you're not going to see all that you could and improve as much as you could. Like, it's an authentic conversation people have to have, because paid flattery, I'm sure there is a market for that. And then but it's not going to do the most for people. And then therapists have to be unafraid to really point out the incongruence. Like, I was joking earlier that the Rogerian therapy from Carl Rogers, like, Rogers is so known to be just a nice, very unassuming person. And even he had incongruence as a big part of his model, like pointing out when things didn't match up with what someone was saying and doing. And it feels like we've lost that to an extent.
Yeah. Well, Rogers, he developed the skilled helper? Is that his model?
Yeah. Well, person-centered therapy. First,
person-centered. Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
Kept changing the name.
Yeah. But, I draw on his work in the work that I do in facilitating, in my other work. So yeah, there's merit to it. You have to be purposeful in what you're doing. But I can understand why people, if for example, Jeremy, I'm with you, and I know about your intersectionality. Let's say you have a whole bunch of things. And I'm already making assumptions about you and your level of oppression and my level of privilege relative to you. So I'm already going to see you as victim or even lesser than me or more important than me because you've got all these oppression markers because of your, intersectional labels. And, I'm not making fun of people, but this is some of the things that I've seen happening. So because of that, there's already a power differential. I'm not seeing you as someone with expertise in your life. I'm already seeing you as someone who's a victim of systemic and racial and so many different oppressions. So that's what I'm going to speak to versus I know nothing about you. I want to get to know you and hear your story. And while I'm listening, of course, I'm going to be making connections in my mind, but I'm not going to start assuming that you're not someone capable of change because you've come to me for help. You're already capable enough for something to happen because you've come to me. You've asked for help, which is the hardest thing. So I have to see you from that strength. And I have to also, while I'm listening to your story and hearing all the bad stuff that you're talking about, I also have to hear out for all the things that you're trying to do, your attempts to do, but it's your belief system or your values, that are underpinning your actions are not getting you where you need to go. So we have to start to look at your beliefs. We have to look at some things that are running in the background, preventing you from trying to make the change that you're wanting. But I have to be able to see that. And I can't if I assume you're oppressed and you're a victim of your circumstances. And, the only way you could change is reading a book or, about deconstructing, um, decolonizing or something.
I follow you.
Yeah. So there are many frameworks we could work with, but unless there's evidence about their use, their effectiveness of use in practice in a specific modality or specific approach, you're just experimenting with people. They're your guinea pigs and you're not necessarily clear about your outcome with them. It's not solution oriented. It's deficit focused, and that's going to keep people in their pain.
Yeah.
So that's stuff I've seen. This is stuff I've had to confront with different people. I work with a lot of practitioners across different professions. So from therapy to, medical, nursing, allied health, disability support. And as activism thinking has come into their practice. And also I've been in that space too myself. I've been, oh, fuck the patriarchy. And, I've been there, but it was temporary to kind of try something on. And then I've kind of moved on because I'm like, that's not my reality. That's not how I'm experiencing the world. I don't have bad experiences with men. I don't have the things that a lot of people experience, but that's not how I'm not going to ignore my own experience and center, a deficit focused way of thinking because it's not helpful. There are things that are going well. We need to use those to leverage them in order to support someone, like the resources that can help someone make the change they want. But
absolutely,
that goes back. And I know I'm talking a lot. One last thing.
This is great.
This is the importance of how you set up your relationship right from the start with anyone you're going to work with, whether it's a friend who wants to offload about something, whether it's a colleague, whether it's a patient, a client, it doesn't matter. If you're someone who it's important to you to remain purposeful, that you at some point are going to have to confront them or challenge their thinking, you need to let them know up front that that's how you work. So every therapist is different. And a lot of therapists don't even know to do that they establish a way of, managing expectations. So if you have a client who really wants you to placate them and validate them, and that's not your way of doing it, you're going to have clashes. And then before you know it, they're going to start accusing you of being racist and the oppressor because you challenged their thinking. You are doing your job. So it's a good way to weed people out right from the start, but you need to, go, what do you understand about therapy? Why are you here? What are you hoping to achieve in working with me? How do you understand therapy or the therapeutic process? Do you have, previous experiences that you wouldn't want to be repeated in this kind of work? Okay. Thank you for sharing your understanding. Can I share with you the way I work and my understanding of my work and what I'm hoping to achieve with clients? That way you could see right from the beginning if things are going to go well or not. Of course, clients are going to come in and lie to you and say, of course, yes, 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 because they're the people pleasers and they want to, they've heard good things about you and they want to work with you. But you will discover very early on if they're people who are wanting the plate to be validated versus those who want change and are ready to, take that on. And of course, you have to be able to build rapport and trust, because if they don't trust you, they're not going to, it's going to be harder to work with them. So Sometimes it could take a little longer with some people, sometimes it's less. And, those ideal clients who are just happy to get on board with the approach because it works for them. But yeah, those explicit conversations that are often uncomfortable for people need to happen at the beginning so you don't discover later on that your practice frameworks and approach are incongruent with what they wanted from you.
Love that. I would double down and say, if you're a helping professional, if you're not good at marketing, pay someone or do a little bit of study. Because for me, my Psychology Today profile talks about my approach of reprocessing trauma, moving through anxiety. And it's definitely not one of these, chewing rocks, spit out nails, black coffee, kind of things. It's not aggressive, but it's like you can put out there kind of what your specialty is. And being an EMDR therapist who does trauma reprocessing, people are going to have a certain idea about my practice and character that's probably accurate. Like, yeah, I'm going to encourage safety, emotional safety first. And then I'm going to say, all right, do we want to move into what we know works? Because for phobias, for anxiety, for PTSD flashbacks, reliving symptoms, dreams, moving through is the way out. And so I already have an ethos, an ethic, and an understanding of what therapy is, that people are going to generally either be on board with that, or I had clients be like, I really just want to do DBT and I don't really want to do any reprocessing. That's fine. We can do DBT. If you want a group, then I'll refer you, whatever. But I think it's on us as professionals to say, if this is happening enough, or if it happens even once, and I'm noticing that there's a kind of a mismatch between what therapy is and what someone's really expecting, how do I make that as frictionless as possible to help them understand it and not to be awkward? I mean, that's how it is with trauma reprocessing. As with EMDR, I help teach EMDR trainings, and what the trainees ask really early on is, well, what do we do? Because they come for successive weekends, and then what they usually do at the second training week is be like, hey, clients say they want to do EMDR, but then they get to talking, we run out of time. What do we do? I'm like, well, you're going to have to say, hey, I'm noticing we're moving on in time here. Do we want to start this now, or do we want to do next time? What are your thoughts? And you have to get really comfortable with doing a very respectful interrupting, and set that up in the front end. Like, hey, I'm probably going to interrupt even during EMDR and have you go back into reprocessing if you're kind of talking and getting out of it, because that's the model. So it becomes like we have to be assertive, and that can be very comfortable for people. But then the flip side, the paradox is it helps the clients not to waste their time if we're not what they're looking for, and if therapy's not what they're looking for.
Yeah. So you have to do that work, the front end. Exactly. You got me thinking about some of the other things. So if you are a practitioner who does bring in a social justice lens in their work, and there's places for that, and it's important to bring it up because there are lots of problems in society. There are things that are rigged against people in certain places, of course. So if I bring that in, I have to let people know that, yes, I bring that in, but you won't get, me spouting ideologies out at you. I'm not going to bring my personal politics into this practice. This is not what that's about. This is about you, your experience, and using what we know to help explore your ecology, your circumstances, to help look at what are the things that are negatively and positively influencing your experience, and discovering those things that are actually working for you and helping you develop capacity, awareness to help use those things that are working, the resources in your life to help you make the changes you want. But you're not going to get me, placating you. You're not going to get XYZ. You will get XYZ. So and you have to reinforce that throughout, because people forget, especially when they go into, they become activated, or they go into their, wounding in the moment.
Yeah.
There will be some things you need to bring them back and, strengthen that rapport so that they build that trust. But like you said, the front end is the most important part of establishing any sort of working relationship, whether it's a collaboration, whether it's a therapeutic relationship. And I'm not a therapist, but I do a lot of work in this space. So I've learned if you don't have a good front end, you're not explicit, you don't negotiate agendas and how you want to work and the things you want to cover, and you give the full rein to the other person because it's patient-centered care, but I'm making myself less relevant. And why am I even there? Why are they even here to see me?
Right.
So it has to be a shared contribution. We're bringing our, it's complementary. They know stuff about them. I know stuff about, my practice expertise. I have my own experiences, but it's irrelevant, or it's, informative, but it's not what going to be talking. I'm not going to be talking about myself to them. I'm going to be drawing on things that I've learned to support whatever. But yeah, it has to be complementary skills, knowledge, expertise. And that has to be made explicit, because a lot of people don't know to work that way, or that's a possible way of working, because they're expecting the authority to tell them, the expert, or they're expecting themselves to be the expert and teaching me as the practitioner of what they need, what they think is best for them. It's like, that's not going to work. That's coercive. That's just like, that's, why are you paying me to tell me what to do for you? Like, you're not acknowledging my expertise. So it's not a good, healthy relationship that way.
No, I love that. I mean, it's such a balance. That's the theme. I mean, you don't want to tell the client they know everything and you're just there. And when I was reading your article about, because I got some quotes too, when I interview people, I really like to take their digital article and then pull out block text. And I love when you talked about the aversion to uncertainty in that saviorism article, because that goes so well along with what we're talking about. It's really going to be the theme, I think, of institutional narcissism. It's like, people are so averse to uncertainty, and the idea of ambiguity tolerance is the antidote to that. That comes from dialectical behavior therapy. It's such a therapeutic virtue that, and we see the opposite. Like, we see, well, you need to have a quick and easy answer. You need to have you need to have a quick validation. Don't ever tell someone that their emotions are invalid. Like, well, they can be valid reflexes, but they don't have to indicate action. Like, so I want to reset and let you, I know we want to talk about, you talked about activism and therapy. And I think you just went over quite a bit of what the difference really is, because I know I wanted to ask you that. And I know you also wanted to talk about the perils of seeking validation when working with others who are also seeking help. I wanted to know more what that meant and open up the floor for you to talk about that if you wanted, because that seemed like a cool concept.
Can you go back again? So seeking validation. Yeah. So repeat that.
Yeah, and I might have written it down wrong or pulled it out wrong from our text conversation. So it's the perils of seeking validation when you're working with others who are seeking help.
Yes. So you as the practitioner are practicing because it's fueling your narcissistic needs. So you're using your work to provide you with the validation you need. So yeah, you're essentially using, your clients, your patients to serve you. First is you serving them, which is the role you're in. Yeah. So why would I want that? Because, well, I'm a bit narcissistic. I've gone into my profession because it makes me feel powerful and it makes me feel in control because of all this knowledge. And so I could just draw on that knowledge and remove any, sort of uncertainty. There'll always be a convenient explanation. But what I'm really doing is I need to feel powerful, and being with someone who's in a relatively more vulnerable position to me, they're seeking my help. So they're going to be just grateful that they're with me. So I'm going to use all the, love bombing and, grooming methods that I know of to get them on side so that they will, love the attention that I'm giving them. But really, it's to feed my need for attention and feeling so powerful and useful. And I need that feedback from my client or my patient about how much I help them or how much they value working with me. And that's going to, that's all I need. Doesn't matter if I'm effective or not. Doesn't matter if if anything I do facilitates change. I mean, it's great if it does, but really it's just about me getting what I need, which is from them, the attention from them. So that's, more on the communal. Yeah. So that's like narcissism. You might call part of that is like communal narcissism, because you're not reading the room. So your empathy is not really on track online, because you're not really looking at them. You're not seeing the whole them. You're seeing them as your supplier. You're seeing them as the resource in order to fulfill your need. But you're trying to convey empathy, and you're using, humanitarian values of, compassion and regard for others to try to serve them. But so that's more of the communal narcissist type of narcissism, but you're not being very effective, and it's all about you and your glory. And you might hear their stories. This is a favorite of mine. Here I go, back on the soapbox. You hear their story. So they're paying you for your time and your knowledge, expertise. You hear this story and you're like, wow, that's really good. So what do? You go online, you go on Substack, you go wherever, and you regurgitate the story and how you help them get through it. So, and you get paid for it by your followers. So you're double dipping on that client. What is the client getting for providing you with the things that you're now using that you've already been paid for, and you're getting paid for again? So I see this a lot. People are, because they want, and I don't think it's maliciously intended. They want to put out things so that they can demonstrate how they have helped somebody, or how they've, how people think and patterns of thinking, things like that. But, I find it unethical that you're repurposing someone's story that was given to you. It's someone's private life that happens in confidence. And yes, of course, they've gotten rid of any identifiers, but it's still someone's material from their life that you're now using as your own to put out in another way that the client never agreed to, or they might have, but because they're so grateful to you because of that power imbalance, they want to please you.
Yeah.
They're not going to say no to you and put it out there, but they're not getting any kickback from their story that you're now using for your purposes. So I find that problematic as a practice. It's different if you're using a collection of things, a collection of story to illustrate, a pattern of behavior, pattern of thinking. You're drawing on multiple things because it's been recurring and you're going, look at this pattern, it's reproducible. I think that's different because, of course, there's a place for you to highlight what your knowledge and expertise, because you're trying to market yourself, but it's how you do it. And are you exploiting somebody's story and material and the vulnerability that they brought in? Because it's sacred. Practice, I believe, is sacred. If, practitioner client, hearing the story, exploring with them, helping them during, a time of need, to now I'm going to use it for, my own commercial needs.
Yeah.
I find that problematic. And I see this stuff on Substack by, lots of different credentialed professionals. And I just wonder, I know you're trying to, and people respond really well to it because we love stories, but have to wonder, you're getting paid once and now you're getting paid again for the same thing by a different group. It just feels really wrong because nothing is going back to that client whose material you took from them. They're the authors of that story. Or you could collaborate together and say, let's co-write this thing, and whatever proceeds I get, we split, because I'm bringing my creativity, you're bringing yours, you're bringing the material.
Yeah.
So that's, a collaborative effort. Yeah. So that's my own personal thing. Lots of people will disagree with that, especially if they're the ones doing it. But yeah, we have to be cautious about how we use things that are brought to us in confidence and repurpose them for our own gain. And, how much? What are the practices? What are our justifications for doing things like that? So that's a little topic. Yeah, it's our needs for validation. It's serving our need for validation, attention, affection. It's feeding us in some way, and it's a fine line because you have to self-promote. But then, what are you using to do it? Are you being ethical in your approach of self-promotion, or?
Yeah. Well, no, I love that. I think what you're saying that I take away is it's probably a good idea to it's probably a good idea to do composite. So to take what you do as a therapist and say, or helping professionals say, well, these are themes, because you use the word themes. I like that a lot. This is what I'm doing. Here's what you do when you talk about, and you use yourself in your article about depression and the liberation cycle, which I think is really awesome and relevant, by the way. And that's a whole nother thing about.
You're so good for my ego. Thank you.
Well, I've heard that before. You're welcome. I don't mean I'm putting the pieces together, and I think it's great. We're both wearing green. We totally pre-planned this. So it's interesting. Your work, you cite yourself a lot, your experiences. And so it's what are you going to do? Sue yourself? You own your own story. So it's so smart to do that. But it does take humility to say, hey, I worked through this. This is my experience. So that's how I view it. But that's a good topic. I mean, someone's story is your basic grist for your Substack mill, for your stacks, your money. So
yeah.
Okay. Very interesting.
It is a good segue into institutional narcissism.
Yes. So,
Yeah.
what do you think are the big warning signs of that for people that are wondering what that is and if they're a victim of it? Like, we could start with just opening that picture there if you're okay with it.
Yeah. So let's define institutional narcissism or narcissism general. So narcissism, you know, distinguishing between a narcissist, which is a person, and narcissism, which are behavioral traits of where someone really centers themselves. They are the center of the world, the universe, and everything the only thing that matters is what they want and need. And it's dependent on, there's an inflated sense of self that, they believe they're more competent than they actually are, superior to everyone or superior to certain people. So that self-aggrandizement, the need for entitlement. So I'm entitled to the world. I deserve the best. I deserve. Everyone owes me things because I'm so great. I'm giving you my greatness. So, you owe me. Yeah. So self-centeredness, my way, the highway, or the highway. Yeah. So self-centeredness, self-aggrandizement, entitlement, addiction to attention and affection. And it's not mutual. I'm the dominant one in this relationship. And all of it really centers on my need for being in control. I have a very fixed worldview, and it is the worldview, and everyone else is wrong if they don't hold this worldview. As a narcissistic person, I have very little or no reflective capacity. So I can't reflect on the results of my actions because it's always everyone else's fault because they didn't fulfill my expectations. So it's really all about me, myself, and I. So, and there's different manifestations of that. If you look at the behavioral spectrum, you've got the communal narcissism. So you have like the saviors, humanitarians who, again, are exploiting a more vulnerable, disadvantaged group or individual to feed their narcissistic needs, but saying,
Right.
I'm veritable. Look at all this beautiful work I'm doing. I'm not actually affecting any change. In fact, I might be making things worse, but it doesn't really matter because look at the glory I get to experience. Look at the rewards and the awards and recognition I get.
Yeah.
And they're just my tools. There's the malignant narcissism. So it's more of like the evil overt, I'm sure there's lots of political and public figures that people can go, yep, they're malignant. Not that they should, but that's, can be quite obvious. There's the more covert or vulnerable, harder to spot, but more ruthless, more devious. The impact can actually feel worse because you didn't see it coming compared to the overt kind of bully person. You've got the group narcissism. My tribe is better than your tribe, and we'll do everything in our power to preserve our greatness, and any threats invite retaliation. So there's lots of subtypes. There's like the dark, then you've got the dark triad. You've got your psychopathy, sociopathy, sociopath,
Yeah.
sadists, narcissists. So you're dealing with the stuff that is often fueled by vengeance and, a need to be the most important person in the world. So it's all about power, control. And why would any one of us want control? Because we feel insecure. We feel that uncertainty, and we fear becoming insignificant, invisible, ceasing to exist. So it is all about, I need to do everything to survive and be visible. So I have the protections that I need to live forever because I'm so important. I'm God, it's a sort of, it can be a God complex for some, or Messiah complex for some. So that's that. And then institutions can be like that, where they believe their mission is the most important thing in the world, and the ends justify the means, and it doesn't matter. And another aspect of all narcissism, regardless of where we are in the spectrum, whether, in some environments or some relational context, I might be more narcissistic in order to survive there, but I can compartmentalize and not act that way with other people. I could be more myself, my, normal self. And it's associated with a lack of accountability. So because I have no reflective capacity, my empathy is low. I don't really care about others, because unless, there's something that I can gain from them, but I can, act empathetically, no problem. But I actually don't really care about them once I've got what I need from them. Yeah. And, or I don't care in general. I just will act it. So it's associated with low accountability or no accountability. There's no consequences from actions, or if I do, I'll find a way to wiggle out of it and blame and scapegoat, blame, do whatever, get out of it because I'm the most important person. So institutions can be like that. It's hard for any institution to be accountable to their actions. I work a lot with, talk a lot about workplace bullying.
Yes.
The whistleblowers, so who could be the victims or could be a bystander, end up getting shafted, and the bully ends up being protected because they've built the protections. They built the protections in their institution or in their, little team, and people are so blinded by their amazingness, or they take a, use a blind eye towards their bad behavior because they're benefiting from the relationship with that person, and they would rather continue to benefit than do the right thing and side with the person who's being abused in that situation. So if the person is protected in that group, in that system, then the system's not going to want to lose them. So they would rather lose the troublemakers, who are the whistleblowers, victims of the abuse. And so when there is legal, situation that gets escalated, and say the person ends up, the victim ends up winning, the institution, how often will you hear an institution say, we've done the wrong thing, we apologize? Usually it goes back to the bully. So they will find some person, the person to blame. They're prepared to let go of that person, even if they've benefited from that bully, to preserve their reputation. So they will never be the ones to admit it, because there's some legal ramifications if they do. If any institution admits their wrongdoing, imagine NIH or USAID or things that are emerging right now, saying we've actually done the wrong thing, we've been corrupted, or we've been corrupt, we are responsible for a range of harms. We regret everything that we've done. They cease to exist. So no business is going to be accountable. They will find someone to blame and remove in order to preserve their reputation and their profits. So this is what we mean by institutional narcissism. There is no personal responsibility for the shit that occurs within their environment, their context, or what they've done externally, the influences they've had externally. They're like, well, we had to do the job. It's just, we made decisions based on the information we had. So it's unfortunate these things happen, but here's a payout so that we keep you quiet.
Yeah, it was an evolving situation or something like that, right?
Yeah. I've heard, hospitals have a part of their operating budget is reserved for those kinds of legal battles, to pay media off, to pay certain people off, to silence them, to preserve their reputation.
I didn't know that, but I knew that the term medical misadventure meant people died from just the doctors making a mistake in surgery or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So some doctors take the fall for systemic problems because they might have done a thorough investigation that looked at all the different moving parts that contributed to this bad outcome. It's rarely one person, unless they're like the psychopath surgeon who goes around branding their name on people's organs when they open them up and no one says anything. That's happened. And then they get discovered, and then they lose their job. But it was happening all along. No one said anything. It wasn't until there was a risk to the reputation of the institution that they finally got rid of the person. So it's
interesting. Yes.
As long as they're doing well for us and making us look good, we're going to keep them around, even if they're causing harm and doing all sorts of shit to their colleagues. Doesn't matter. Doesn't hurt us yet. Yeah. So this is common everywhere. So they'd rather preserve the things that are working for them and protect them than, be ethical and accountable. So that's narcissism in general. No accountability, fearful of accountability, because there's a lot of uncertainty. There is uncertainty with being accountable. What's going to happen to me? What's going to, I don't have control in this situation anymore. Now it's in the hands of someone else, and I've got to be the, fate maker. I'm the one ultimately in control. So I've got to do everything. But eventually you will lose it, because that's what happens.
Yeah. I think people are becoming more aware of how charity work and things like that are used to obfuscate, bad behavior, like certain YouTubers who will do something like give to massive charities. I mean, there's a lot of that now is being uncovered. And on the government level, you brought that up. It's like, well, why are all these things happening? And then now, like, something in business culture happened where apologies or admitting something happened it's tantamount to basically just the worst possible thing, which is interesting because on a psychoanalytic level, we know that pathological narcissism, like NPD, is this narcissistic personality disorder, is very associated with being unable to say thank you and sorry. So when you see that businesses can't say, hey, we messed up, or hardly ever,
Mm.
that's very interesting to me. And I
Yeah.
think that's unsustainable.
Yeah. I mean, I have a friend, colleague who is a psychiatrist and very into truth and reconciliation because, psychiatry is responsible historically and in present times for horrible things that have been done to people in the name of health and helping. And so she brings that into her practice. She says, there have been harms and I've inadvertently contributed to these harms. And these are the things, and these are the things I'm prepared to do to make sure that you're protected. So one thing is, if you're having a mental health breakdown, we will not call the police because we know what happens to people often when police get involved. And we don't want you locked up. We don't want you sectioned. We want to make sure you have the care to support your recovery or getting through this crisis that you're in right now. She'll do things like that. And that's rare. That's rare for somebody to call out their profession because people, one, your identity, especially
Yeah.
your psychiatrist, you've been through years of school. It's grueling. It's not fun. You're constantly having to prove yourself. You're in a competitive environment. You have to, and you have to be professional. So you've got this, identity that has formed over the years, and you're part of a profession that you like to be proud of. Last thing you want to do is say things about it that will make you look bad because you're associated with it. You're practicing of it. So people will just kind of defend some of the practices or deny the harms or deny the extent of the harms and to protect. That's known, there's a theory behind this, a system justification theory, that regardless of the harms that people within a hierarchy are doing, we will always protect the highest one because my survival and success depends on them being in that role, or
Yeah.
my success depends on me maintaining this identity or maintaining my affiliation with this system versus this is actually causing me moral distress and injury. I need to get the hell out of here before I, want to become, before I become even suicidal, because that's one of the no now of that, being in these situations when they are incongruent with your values and or your morals and how you want to practice them.
Yeah. I think, so so we've got two doctors in here making good points. Dr. Dobransky brought up earlier, he was wondering about the stats on dark triad traits in therapists. And I quickly Googled it and it's like, oh, they have less dark triad traits than typical. I don't know. I don't know about that. And then Roganoff here. Yeah. What do you think about that? And we'll get to Roganoff's point.
Rogoff. Yeah. Dr. Simon Rogoff.
Yeah.
Bit like a cult. Yes, it's exactly like they're cults. That's exactly what I talk about. Institutions form to be cults. Now, they don't have to be the restrictive kind of total institutions. They can be what I call the moderate cults, that you don't think you're in a cult. You're pleased to be affiliated and associated and belonging to these organizations. But as long as you're benefiting from being part of it, you're less likely to question and challenge some of the practices. You might turn a blind eye. But yeah, if you're someone who has strong connection to your moral compass, it's going to hurt you over time. You're not going to be able to withstand it unless you sell your soul and assimilate into
Right.
The, symbol of the narcissistic institution, which I see happening all the time. I saw that happening to me to a degree in my partial assimilation, and then I had to remove myself. So it's, it's common. But go back. What were the first comment?
Just the Dr. Dobransky had wondered the rates of dark triad traits in psychotherapists, and I wonder that too. I wonder, and if they're even endorsing it. Like I would say, narcissism may be high, but not the grandiose type. I would say. I mean, I think psychopathy is probably lower because they probably do feel a lot of empathy. But I think narcissism, I would be interested in. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
I've read a few things. I was interested in when I was doing talks with Dr. Jordan Shaw.
Yeah, I love him. Yes.
Yeah. And we were looking at religious leaders, so priests, rabbis, and there's a few studies that show that they're higher in the, psychopathy range. So people who want to, they weren't necessarily that when they entered the profession and got promoted or among the ranks. I think it's what happens to you as a result and your craving and lust for power. It's seductive and it does something to you and you want to maintain it. So you might be more of the, grandiose personality, the charismatic personality, because you have to be to
Yes.
crowd. You've got to, the preacher, you need that. You need to be a good orator. You need to have all those attributes, but I've heard lots of stories of horrible, horrible behavior behind the scenes. Horrible. So
yeah.
I'm not surprised by the results of those studies that show, higher levels of, I think it was psychopathy. Might have been like narcissists, NPD, but I think it was psychopathy because it was relating to psychopathy among CEOs of different, private companies or public companies. So again, when the higher you rise, you increase your likelihood because of the things you've had to do in these narcissistic institutions in order to gain favor and get promoted and, get to the top of the chain. So the chain of command. So you will eventually become more psychopathic. So I'm not, So therapists, I think I don't know therapists would be high in psychopathy versus, say, surgeons.
Yeah.
Because there isn't the prestige. There isn't the same prestige. No one elevates therapy except for a few, but they tend to be like the influencers. But then, I wouldn't be surprised if there's some, psychology with those. As they get more and more attention, they become addicted to it. They might act like it doesn't matter, but you see, they're overexposed. So would you want to be overexposed if you were humble? You were just you wouldn't want to. You want to break. You wouldn't be dependent on constant visibility to feed something. So, so I wasn't surprised. So it's not something people are born with. I think it occurs throughout someone's professional trajectory as they climb higher and higher and get more and more attention, and they become less and less critical of, their ability to reflect on their conduct critically and have people go, actually, I think you're in your ego here. I think you're a bit out of your depth, or you've crossed the line, or you're no longer in your lane and you're making comments about things that's not actually your expertise. Those people become less present in that person's life because they only want people who keep telling them how great they are and making suggestions to make them greater. So they lose sort of a critical friend, and they just have people where they, the echo chamber. That tends to hurt. Yeah. We need those critical friends to keep us grounded and continually challenge our thinking, not in a confrontational way, but in a way that, okay, I could see that what I really wanted in that interaction was that person's level of influence. I cozied up to them so that I can get in there. But I realize that's not actually good for me because that's me using them. Maybe they're getting something from me, but it's clear I'm benefiting more than they are. But they don't know what I'm really after. So thanks for calling me out on that. This is not a good step for me to take because it's going to it's taking me a step towards psychopathy potentially. And less towards humility, which is actually one of my values.
Yeah, I think that is a wonderful point. People have to be open to how they're being shaped by their environment, really. If you're not open to that, you'll really be moved in different directions before you know it. And so self-awareness is huge. And I think in institutional narcissistic situations, people are often just so caught up in survival and thinking in those terms that anxiety makes them more malleable to being pushed around. I know, like, if therapists are just being treated as like very like batteries at different giant organizations, and a lot of those don't pay very well. So if there's a corporate culture and you're early on in your career and just happy to be working as a therapist to slug it out for those hours, you're probably pretty likely to go along with whatever the Kool-Aid is. And unfortunately, and then get hyped up in that team environment and whatever kind of ideology. I mean, a lot of those bigger organizations are so unbelievably primed with so many different trainings and things. And there are people who, I think that a lot of the supervisors can be very much into keeping whatever's going and putting a smiling face on it. I could tell stories, but I probably won't.
I'm sure, I mean, we both have stories, but I certainly can't talk about them right now. But it's like everyone. So what you're really talking about is what I've written about on assimilation. So all the different frameworks and trainings and messages, propaganda to help people assimilate and to become the preferred archetype, the preferred person, personality in that organization. And the supervisors or the managers are part of that, this kind of bureaucratic stronghold to make sure that whoever's there are the ones who are the right fit. But you have to fit having assimilated, going through a process of becoming and embodying certain attributes, even if they're not your natural attributes, in order to succeed. Only if you're wanting to succeed. But you don't know what's happening to you. Just like when you come into a cult, you're just excited to get this job, especially if you're a newbie therapist. You're just so happy to get employed somewhere. Good. Now I need to prove myself. So you're going to go the distance to prove yourself versus the institution proving itself to you. They don't care. So there's already, because there's that inequality, there's already that imbalance. You need them more than they need you. You're easily replaced. You should be grateful that, you're there. So you actually owe them. That's the kind of mentality, which is the narcissist mentality. And so you're going to work hard and you're going to do everything necessary. And that might mean, and you won't notice it. You won't notice what's happening to you, but if something is being done to you because you enter into a cultural matrix that's invisible and it starts to influence your thinking and your behavior in ways that you don't realize until you come out of it for a little while. Then, your mind is not constantly bombarded with its messages and these invisible influencing factors and emotions and narratives, so that once you're out, it's just like leaving an abusive or toxic relationship. You start to see things a little more clearly. You're like, oh, why is it happening like that? Why are they behaving? Why did I say that in that situation? That's so unlike me. So you can't get that perspective when you're constantly immersed in interacting and exposed to that environment. That's why people can't see it. And then suddenly they're like experiencing symptoms of burnout. And like, how's this happening? Maybe I'm overworking. Maybe no, there's so many other things going on where you are not able to express yourself as you need to because you're too busy performing a part, but you didn't even notice you were doing it. And it sucks your energy.
Yes. And I think that's a really good, and you can let me know when you have to go, by the way. I'm enjoying this, but I also want.
Yeah, me too. Like, it's Saturday morning, almost noon, like whatever. I have a cruisy day ahead.
I think this is really illuminating. It takes me back to our days of riffing on Clubhouse, which were so fun.
Yeah, they were. And lots of people have joined in, and, Kelly's has had lots of comments and she has a question. She'd love to hear us talk about this phenomena online. Kelly, do you want to be a little bit more specific about the phenomena? I don't know when you put that comment in and I was ranting. And Elsie says, to hell with the right fit. The people judging you are not competent enough to judge anyone. Yeah, I don't think anyone's competent to judge anyone.
Yeah.
Unless it's a judge in a court case with the specific situation. Sure. But again, if you're a newbie therapist and you rely on references and things to advance in your professional career, you will have to fit in. You will have to do these things. You will have to submit to the institutional conditions. Otherwise, they're going to find a way to get rid of you. They see you as a challenger or disruptive, or you're just not fitting in. You're not competent because you're not people pleasing or doing whatever the culture requires you to do to seem like a team player. So you will want to leave before they get rid of you. Yeah, some people don't really have a choice because it's a competitive world, competitive field, unless you've established something within yourself that you can rely on yourself and not these institutions. But unfortunately, I don't know. Like, there's so much rhetoric about be yourself, be your authentic self, but you can't be authentic. First of all, what the hell is authentic? You are going to you are going to modify the way you behave based on your relational context. So if I'm outspoken, which I am, as you can tell, and I go into a workplace that has all these other, values of we value diversity and, this. But if I start being outspoken about things that don't fit their preferred narrative, now I'm suddenly a threat. Yeah. But I've put them in their, values about diversity. Diversity should mean the diversity of perspectives, right? Diversity of worldviews, diversity in all, but no, it wasn't the right diversity. But I didn't know that. I was naive. I trusted them. So I walked in being authentic and honest, and now I'm being, there's backlash to my honesty, and I'm being sidelined now and excluded and all these shitty things that have backfired. So I can't be authentic. I can be authentic in situations where there's mutual trust and respect. And, we have, there's intimacy. I don't mean sexual intimacy, but there's an intimate relationship we built out with a lot of relational currency that I can say things respectfully, but openly. I can be outspoken and not be judged. Or if I'm judged, I won't know it. They won't act that way with me. So that's the preferred place for me to be outspoken versus an environment, another context where it's not to my advantage to be outspoken. So these blanket statements about authenticity is bullshit because first of all, we don't know what's authentic. I don't know what's authentic because I'm changing all the time and modifying myself in different relational contexts. I'm being myself. I'm not, but there's sometimes I will perform because that's what's required of me in order to gain the trust of somebody, to gain what's required to meet a higher purpose, to fulfill a higher purpose. Now, I'm not being fake. I'm still me, but I'm not going to be outspoken. I'm not going to give all my thoughts. I will be more reflective. I'll be more pensive. I will slow down the interaction. So I'm still being me, but I have to temper it for the situation, knowing that there is an outcome that needs to be achieved. And it doesn't make sense for me to show up in my full self, authentic and all in your face, because it's going to be, it's going to be confronting. It's not going to be palatable to some people. So we have to be discerning and wise. That requires wisdom to know what is the right thing to do and how to read people and in order to effectively respond. So again, you're fulfilling a purpose or, you're working towards some sort of outcome, not an outcome that I control, but if I want someone to trust me, there are things that I need to do and not do. And, I'm not going to start talking about religious principles to someone who's, atheist. It has nothing to do with the situation that we're in. But some people might feel, well, I'm being my full self and I'm going to raise this thing because it's important to me. But it's not important for the purpose of your encounter with that person. So how about you? Put that to the side for now. Maybe later, if you build up some, again, some sort of relationship where that becomes part of it, sure. But, if you're trying to build rapport and trust, it's not necessarily how you go about it. It's not necessarily with that person. So I don't know why I've wandered off into this, but but we can't be authentic because I don't even know what that is because we're constantly changing and we're completely influenced by our relational context. The only people who are not, and I think about Trump, it will just for people who they're not intimidated by authority. They are the ultimate authority. Not that I know this man, but this is from what I, seeing audacious, do what I want. I'll do what I want. I don't care what you think, or I care only about those people who I respect and what they think, and I'll listen to them. But just very clear about, that. So the ones who are more authentic are the ones who just don't give a shit about what anyone thinks. They don't care.
Okay. Yeah.
And they will not adjust themselves for anyone. They'll just be who they are. So it does require strong narcissism to be like that. And I'm not saying it's good or bad, but you need to have some strong confidence in yourself, maybe going into arrogance. Otherwise, I don't think it makes sense to think that you can go into any institution and act in the way that you think is authentic, because every institution has, norms and a set culture that you did not establish and you will not change unless you're a leader and have that level of influence. Then you can make some changes, but no. It's going to be very difficult because you're going against an entrenched status quo that has been present and part of why that team has been successful or not even successful or not successful, but you don't have that level of influence to just change things as you like it. And by allowing yourself to be showing up exactly as you are, it's just not a realistic way of thinking about how we operate in the world. It would be nice that we didn't have to, modify ourselves, but we live in a society that has eroded moral principles. Maybe they'll come back online, but it would be nice. You can't we're experiencing a cluster B society where people just act the way they want. They don't care about decorum. They don't care about how people perceive them. It's very childlike that, they don't have those inhibitions because they haven't been fully socialized. So you have lots of people who act as if they haven't been socialized because that's what they're seeing around them. And they're just conducting themselves, like with no decorum. I'm thinking about, no like propriety, like this. It's just kind of, and I'm showing my age, my generation, Gen X, but I'm like, come on, you try to pull that shit in my workplace, it ain't going to happen for you. But that's the online. This is what happens when we spend a lot of time online and we've lost those social cues. We've been locked down for a few years, so that has affected us even more. And it's become okay to just say whatever you want and put everything out there. So your privacy and the things that have been held as more sacred are now, there's like the private public barrier seems to have been eliminated. So everything, it's a free for all. So we've lost the containment. We've lost boundaries of what should be private or it's helpful if it's private and what is okay for public consumption. And that has affected our social interactions. So people are just horrible to each other online because they don't see the other person. They're anonymous.
Yeah.
So
I actually think people finish.
Yeah. So if you think you have nothing to lose by that interaction, you're not considering what you can lose, then you're just going to act the way you want. There's no risk for you. And that's fantasy for all. Isn't that a fantasy for all of us to, exist at least for a little while without any responsibility to do whatever the hell we want and no consequences? Yeah, that's nice. It's a nice fantasy, but it's not reality. And it's a nice fantasy for a little while to just be able to do whatever you want. I mean, I personally wouldn't want anyone hurt because of my actions, but this is not what people are thinking. They're not considering the consequences or the potential impact that they have on others. They don't care. Very self-centered. It's just, I feel this way and I'm putting out there and I don't really care what you think. So it's shameless.
Man, I love all that. So I was going to say, I mean, if you look at what hits people's dopamine now, what kind of gets them going, I mean, there is a sort of weird helplessness mixed with narcissism, which makes complete sense. And it's very much this irrational belief that there's like the omniscient parent that can know what they want and give it to them. And with online dating, there's a huge emphasis on finding your build-a-mate and swiping to find them. And then like you can customize the person. If they're not who you want, keep looking and block them. I feel like online dating is a very passive-aggressive venue too, because it's not like you go approach the person, you have to talk. Both of you have to talk. It's very much at any time someone can immediately dip out, and it goes to the person who's the most willing to leave quickest. And so they turned online dating into this horrific game show called The Button, where people will sit across from each other and you listen, you talk until someone hits the red button in the middle of the table. And that means that you make the person get up from the table and leave across from you if you press it first. So people ended up pressing it to see who else they could meet. And it's very vile. So think about it though. That's like, you didn't have that back in the day. Like you talk to someone at the bar and maybe you think that there's a better person you could talk to, but you're not totally incentivized to roll through everybody.
Yeah.
It doesn't, there's something vile to that. And it's very much incentivizing FOMO culture, fear of missing out, keep optimizing. I think we're training people to be very, we're already training to be narcissistic. That's just a given. But I also think we're training people to be minorly psychopathic and callous.
Yeah.
As much as they can be within their phenotype, within their loading, because I'm a firm believer, like I've read The Wisdom of Psychopaths, that book. There are neurological studies that some people experience empathy in their frontal lobe differently or less than others. But I do think you can train it down the same way you desensitize other stuff. And I'm hearing you say that, and my brain's thinking, yeah, I think that's what's actually occurring now.
Yeah. I think it's a lot to do with instant gratification as well. Like,
Yeah,
I know what I want. I know what I don't want. And show me the money. Give it to me now. Give it to me now. Give it to me now. Again, very
marshmallow tennis.
It's just emotional immaturity and entitlement. I deserve the best and I'm going to keep pressing the button until I get what I believe I deserve, what's best for me. So, yeah, I mean, I met my husband online. This is pre-app days back in 2002. But yeah, it is a odd way to meet people, and you're being like judged, and it's not like the good old days. Not that I had the good old days, but when you had more, I don't know, social connections and a network around your family, and people introduced each other through who they knew. It's still happening, but it just feels like a more fragmented world. It's harder to do stuff like that. So we need other ways. So the online makes sense, but yeah, it has affected the way we express discernment is less compassionate, less pleasant. Yes.
I think there's an answer to, I'm not a black pillar. I don't take the black pill, which means I hate people and I don't like women and think everyone's awful. But what I would say is you practice who you become. So don't, like, the first time you start judging people callously, that doesn't mean settle for someone that you're not attracted to today. It means just think about how you behave and interact with others. And that when you practice repeatedly not doing that, then when you practice repeatedly saying that person doesn't matter, you really do default to that. So this is not a game. We treat it like a game. Either all of life is a game or it's not. Like, dating is either a game for you and the other person, or it's very serious. You can't opt out of it and say, well, to me, I can treat people how I want, but then when I get treated that way, it's awful. And I see that a lot. I see a lot of deserve the model. I don't have to change anything about me. And that's blowing my mind, because I don't know how long we can sustain that, to be quite candid with you. I think we're at a maximum point of that now, really.
Yeah, and I think there's the pushback now where you have a lot of people, especially my generation, who are like, no, I'm not tolerating this behavior. No. And you snap back and you almost go into parent mode and go, okay, listen, little man, little lady, this is not how we treat people. No, bring back politeness, bring back decorum, bring back consideration, because you had something to lose as a result of it, of not doing it. Your reputation was at risk, and you cared about that. You cared about, there would be repercussions. There would be real world consequences for you acting this way. So, but because, we're influenced by what we see around us, what becomes permissive, and just seeing the sort of moral erosion and the representative behaviors that manifest from that. So that's kind of what we see. It doesn't mean that's all there is, but that's what's amplified in social media.
Erosion. I like that because I've used it is societal regression from Murray Bowen, who did the fancy genograms that look like the circuit diagrams, all that.
Oh yeah.
Stuff. He talked about societal regression. Well, I mean, look at it, ties back into institutional narcissism, and it ties into, in the mental health field, it's downstream. Psychology is downstream of culture, and the problem is, we're a weird profession. We're a mix of philosophy, theology, and medicine. Like, we came off of Freud, but then we also have a lot of religion because people don't believe in God and they want human guidance. And we got a lot of philosophy because CBT is based in Stoicism. And so everything's mixed together. And sometimes I feel like the ingredients, it's like someone put ketchup in the mix and they're trying to make a cake. It's like, it's not all fitting right sometimes. You have to kind of decide, which way are you going to go? And when someone becomes like a guru type and it becomes really quasi-religious, like the trauma cult is becoming now, with like this, the idea of like the transgenerational trauma, like, which I totally empathize with the Holocaust studies, but then people are now extrapolating that into weird stuff that's almost like engrams, like what is in your body that was left behind. Like, wait a minute, we don't know all of that stuff now.
Yeah. And what about all the things that were put in your genetics and your psyche that were, the triumphs? Why aren't we talking about those? Why are we drawing on those? So yeah, we're emphasizing, it's again, the deficit model, the reductionist deficit model, where we hyper focus on what we think is wrong because we've got this crazy view of right and perfection that is unattainable, and we try to eliminate the thing, but instead of pain is pain. Make it, yes, pain, you can have less pain, but it's still pain. So how about looking at what's working in your system and leveraging those things? I feel like a broken record player.
Oh, that's interesting.
About that. We have to focus on what's working, not denying the things and ignoring the things that are not working, but how do they coexist? How do they influence each other? How are they, feeding off each other? And what one thing can we change that moves us towards the better rather than one thing we change that reduces that thing, but it's still there? Reducing suffering is still suffering. So how do we go into increasing the things that are great that can help, you can apply to the suffering to.
I love that. So it's beautiful. So when Dr. Dobransky and I go live and we talk about like, how do we look at the virtues, the values? So men going to therapy is often seen as a punishment. It's like, well, you're going to have to sit and emote and sit and just emotionally hemorrhage. Well, wait a minute. How are we taking what your triumphs are? Like, there's literally a therapy called solution-focused therapy. And it's all about saying, let's imagine the problem wasn't there. You woke up and there was a miracle and things were better. So ACT, acceptance commitment therapy, you accept reality and you commit to live by your values. And those values can be things like family, spirituality. It can even be like financial security. It doesn't have to just be charity, right? So we look at like the strengths-based. What's really weird that you bring up is a really good point, maybe even worth an article or a stream on its own. It's like there was this giant shift in the twins. So when I went to grad school, I kept hearing the phrase solution-focused therapy, where you take a client and you figure out what their competencies are and you really remind them of that. So I went to school before the massive new wave of a lot of ideology that's now like the stuff that's very much like helpless victim stuff. I went to school before that and slightly before. So then what was big was clients are experts and they have a lot of competencies. And so then right after that came almost like a just kidding moment. And it's like, well, wait a minute. There was this huge realization that focusing on solutions can actually cut down on session needed and really jet people off to success. And it's like, well, no. So actually, we need to not think that way. And it just kind of confuses me because the solution came before the problem and it's not the other way around.
So the just kidding moment is like, shit, we're losing cash flow because we need to create dependence. So by reinforcing that there's a problem that we need to keep working on, that keeps the customers coming back versus I want to work myself out of a job. That's actually fulfilling for me. And there's still more people who need help. And that way I can see more people. How I work as a coach. I don't want to have, a year-long program. No. If I can't help you first of all, we work on developing specific goals. Yes, you have your big vision, but realistically, it's a stepwise process of achieving one thing and building on that. And to achieve that thing, you have to discover what your skill set is, your competencies, what are the, barriers, what are the enablers in your context. And then let's discover what needs to change and what are the skills you need to implement the strategies. Well, let's develop strategies. And what are the things you need to do to, execute them in order to move towards that outcome. And when you get to that outcome, well, there's going to be change. It'll have a ripple effect. How will you deal with it?
Yeah.
Because there's going to be lots of things coming to you that's going to try to tempt you to go back to your old default. So we have to continue to work and keep you motivated to override that just to be able to create this new habit or this new thing, this new pattern. So, and once people develop the skill to do that, they don't need me to keep doing that. They can then identify their next goal, or I could help them again create a smarter goal, and then they can again repeat the process of what they needed. But it's leveraging the resources around them to help that happen, because if they're dependent on me, then how's that going to help them change? So it's holding people's hand through something. So that's not everyone's cup of tea. Some people want more hands-on. Some people want to just have that long-term interaction because they need that for their sense of safety, or they don't have a lot of friends, or there's just different needs for different people. But as a practitioner, I'd be like, how am I being effective with this person if they're just dependent on me? This isn't for both.
No, it's not. It's not. I mean, Pierre Genet, who was very big at traumatology, one of the earliest in the 1800s, has that model. You made me think of it, of safety and stabilization first, and then processing the trauma, and then integration and connecting with others. So what does that look like? Okay, getting safe, feeling rapport with your therapist or whomever, and then working through it, but then deciding, what does this look like in the future? What is my identity now? It doesn't need to be helpless. Where do I go in the future? I mean, so I think Gen Z, they were raised in many ways to focus really. I read an interesting article by Freya India about like Gen Z not having any moral guidance. And basically it was, well, stay physically safe and protect yourself. But then there wasn't really a lot of character development. And so when you said, what the hell is being authentic, or however you said it, which I love, we're not like, this is my whole soapbox. So I'm Christian, but I actually believe, so you have a soul, sure, but you develop yourself. When people talk about finding yourself, it's like, okay, let's not make that a narcissistic quest. You actually make yourself in many ways. You forge yourself. You practice who you become. And so, like this authenticity thing, it's like, well, I'm just being honest. Well, actually, people will use that as a cloak to be very offensive and rude, insulting. It's like, well, actually, you can say things in a way that's positive.
Yeah. You have to think about, how do I want this person to experience me? If my values are, I want to be helpful and useful in all my interactions, not as a savior, but I want people to feel good after having interacted with me rather than worse, then I need to be conscious about how I communicate with that person and continue to build on the rapport that we have. But when people are just like, people don't consider that. So I'm relational. So I'm always going to consider relation. How do I help this person? So if they've had shitty experiences with others, well, how can I be a different person to those other people where they have a positive experience and they start to maybe consider, develop a little more confidence or a little bit more trust around other people, because they could see that not all people are shit and shitty and treat them badly or talk down to them or make them feel stupid. So I do a lot of work with people, a lot of work with practitioners, but variety, but also, people of various education levels. And yes, I have a doctorate, but, my language, my approach has to be, I want to get alongside you. So I need to make sure, this is something Adam Coleman and I spoke about yesterday. I need to make sure that I'm relatable, because building a connection with you is the most important thing in order to be able to facilitate some sort of change down the line. And I'm also experiencing a change because my training as expert makes me always higher on this hierarchy. And so how can I learn something if I'm always the expert? So I need to not lower myself. Well, lower is a humility, but
Sure.
be with someone else. I see someone as a human who has value, and that there's something that I can gain from the exchange, even if it's just a pleasant interaction, but I don't ever want to come away from an interaction going, oh my God, I know I made them feel like shit. I would say that. And I do sometimes, but I have to then follow up and go, shit, I realized when I said X, it might have come across as that, so I've been feeling icky about it. And I just want to, you don't have to say anything. You don't have to make me feel better. Like, I don't need that. I just wanted to acknowledge that it wasn't congruent with what I would have liked you to experience with me. So is that narcissism? But is that narcissism? Because I'm overly concerned with my self-image. But it's not because I need someone to compliment me or make me feel better about myself. That's not what I'm seeking from other people. Whereas narcissism,
No.
it's me going, I've violated my own moral principles, and because accountability is also important to me, or personal responsibility, I also want to acknowledge that with someone, because they might be feeling shitty. And if nothing is said, then that's the stuff lingering between us. And again, I'm thinking about how much interaction am I going to have with this person? But if it's there, it's going to pollute our relationship. So it doesn't matter how the next time it's there. So I need to name that up and clear the air with them, so that we can, continue on the work that we've been doing in building and sustaining a useful relationship, but also the work that I'm doing with them to help, whatever it is I'm helping them to produce. So these are things I'm conscious of. It's not necessarily something other people are conscious of.
Again.
There's the what we've been talking about, the poor conduct. Other people were putting comments.
Okay, so I need to have a moment here of my self-image. I was about to bust out laughing about 20 minutes ago because someone put in the chat, oh no, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank God. I almost closed this. God, I can't do that. Don't do it. Somebody said, I want to be a gonzo roving dentist, and it made me almost bust out. And I was like, No, yeah, I'm not there. I can't do this. I can't make this go up, y'all, because I'm afraid of closing this. But someone said I used to want to be a roving dentist. And I don't like that hit me in such a way like, why is that? Why are you saying that now? I love it. Thank you, Gonzo Roving Dentist. I appreciate you for the moment of levity. But yes, let's see what are people saying, because I don't want to hit it and do the wrong thing.
Well, Shay, Michelle, oh, hi, Shay, fellow Australian. Yeah, so she has said a lot of things about dating culture. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, she's saying this is a good point. People seem to be connecting more today through common hate values than positive, healthy values. Yeah, so
Hatred.
many ideologies.
Hate values.
Yeah, many ideologies are not. They're based on the evil oppressors, and things are bad. Things are bad, and we can't be bad, and we can't believe those bad things. Like, yeah, not necessarily like we're connecting. Well, people are connecting because they believe in what they believe are good things. So I'm trying to think of a specific example. You can come up with one. Um, I guess social justice ideas, and
Yeah.
social justice is important. It's good. What has been attributed to social justice activities have become injustice activities. So I talk about the social injustice warriors, people who decide who are the oppressed and who are the oppressors based on, again, a set of features so that they can put people into easily put people into these categories. And then they base their practices on that binary of good and bad. And I don't want to be associated with bad. I want to be associated with good. So these are the things that I'm going to do. But the way I'm going about them, I'm not going to question my approach because this is how everyone else is doing it. And because I believe in social justice, I'm just going to assume what I'm doing is good and benevolent and impactful when it could be detrimental to others, to myself. But, I'm not going to bother reflecting on it because my belief system tells me what I'm doing is good. My intent is good. I mean, I thought that too, right? Lots of
Yeah.
dictators thought what they were doing is for the, benevolent reasons and, to better the world. But,
Yeah.
when
Yes.
destruction, harm, cruelty is part of what's involved in your work, canceling people, mobbing people, exposing people, basically exposing people's private lives and making it public so that others can hate on them. This is not good. This is not social justice.
Right.
Bullying, harassment, revenge, cruelty. It's dark triad behaviors. That's what it is. So, but you're dealing with so many people that it feels like they're in this like possessed state or dissociated state that they can't see themselves in the process. They can't see that what they're doing is actually harmful and destructive and getting rid of the things that are, or destroying the things that are good and helpful that have taken, you know, hundreds of years to build up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's an example of, I guess, without naming specific ideology of social justice. But yeah, that's what we're seeing a lot. But there's also good things that are happening that are not being broadcast. And in the little, activities that, again, are trying to build capacity in a disadvantaged community rather than coming in as the saviors, throwing all this money at them, being part of the charity industrial complex where we just create dependence. And then over time, our fraudulent activities are exposed and all the money that has been siphoned off to these things so that I could be the savior and look good and also influence governments to do what I want. Or my puppet master wants. Yeah. So I haven't actually done anything good. I've introduced things to communities or cultures that haven't had those things, convincing them this is what they need that's better. And it could be what will benefit them. But unless I've helped build capacity so that they can become self-sustaining and not require my intervention, not require external sources, I support them to build connections with their internal resources and support so that they can, they're not a drain or they're not, dependent. So that's part of the charitable industrial complex. It's an institutional narcissist. It's all about its greatness and look at all this great stuff that we get to do. Look, we've covered all this territory around the world. We've helped impoverished communities, have access to this and access to that. But what happens when the money dries up? They're fucked. They're fucked because you haven't done the work of building their capacity because you thought you're better and you're the expert. You're the, You're the savior. So but a lot of people don't see that. They just see the nice, generous activities and the, humanitarian efforts. They don't stop to think about the organization and how it's trying to just feel good about itself and whatever nefarious activities are going on behind the scenes to sustain itself as relevant and significant, because that's what narcissists do. I have to preserve my relevant, significance, existence so that I live forever. So I have to buy out lots of people. I have to love, mom, and groom and do all the things to sustain myself. And I'm going to use and exploit those disadvantaged people to feed my need for relevance, attention.
Yeah. I mean, I would say, and there's a lot of games, a lot of fake sort of hyperbolic terminology. It's all very non-grandiose. When you learn how to see it, you always spot it from then on. I think we put so much emphasis on narcissists being grandiose, that the ones who are grandiose and abusive, whereas the sort of toxic positivity, spiritual guru or female guru sort of narcissism really hits people, and their defenses are not up for that.
Yeah, especially women. People don't see sinister women coming. They don't, especially when they're beautiful looking and they come across as like the spiritual and they have the sort of boho chic style. No, they're sweet. Right. And they wear neutral tones, and they have like, great jewelry and great flowing hair, and, like the worst gurupreneurs I see are women. There's some really bad ones, but man, the women gurupreneurs are, and they use the covert and communal narcissist traits in order to attract their tribe. But they want their tribe. They want a tribe, they want a community, and they want to be at the center of the community. So they're essentially cult leaders too. And selling, I've had all these initiations and I can do all this special healing magic. And, so, and you can't verify this stuff alone.
Of course not.
Yeah. But people need to learn the lessons they need to learn. Some people will benefit, some people benefit for a little bit, and then they will see, they're not benefiting. They can see the grifting, and then they'll leave, like everyone that's the thing. Same with what I talked about with workplaces. It can come across as a bit cynical that you can't be authentic and you can't do it. And there's an exception to that statement, because I've worked in groups where it's a beautiful culture, but it's been intentional in its cultivation. It didn't just happen. And it was continuous work from everyone involved to make sure we sustain this amazing culture. So it can happen even within a larger, more dysfunctional, toxic environment. You can have this little buffer zone with people, but it has to be intentional. Everything has to be explicit. So it's not a norm and it's not a natural thing that just happens. It takes work, intention, monitoring, feedback. You have to have all that built in. Same with therapeutic relationships. If that's the kind of practice you want to be as a practitioner, you need to do that and put some of the ownership on the other person, or they hopefully will take accountability for how they're contributing to the therapeutic relationship. But if they don't know that that's part of their role or responsibility when they come in, that they're not just the vulnerable person and I'm just going to help you. No, you have a part to play. There's stuff you need to do because this is your life. You got to take action. I'm here to support that, but this is a collaborative process. So I can't channel my goods to you effectively if you're not prepared to take some level of responsibility for what we cultivate together. So again, these are things that are not natural and they're not standard, but they're present, but we don't really hear about them.
No. Well, yeah, I'm so glad that you do. We have to be intentional about creating good habits, whereas bad habits can just be very quick. They can very quickly take over easily.
Yeah.
I think that's a great point.
And I could slam the fake sisterhood all day long, but we don't have that time because we do have to wrap up. But, and I'm a traitor to my sex, but I'm also a product. I've experienced, the dark sides of feminine energy, dark side of women who are thirsting for power. And we've talked about before, that was me too. So I never became a cult leader, but I could see how it was possible didn't take much. It could have been easily possible. So thankfully, that's not the direction I went into. But yeah, there's a dark side to everything. Dark side to compassion, dark side to empathy, dark side to every virtue. If you don't use in the wrong context or in the wrong way, you can cause harm.
No, I think, yeah, you made a great point with that. I would say people have to be very aware of the reasons they're getting into a profession. So you've got a lot of life coach types, and they're like, some of them are really in the business for the right reason, and others just are very charismatic and want to package something up and sell it, and don't really care about who they impact if it's false advertising. And so with kind of you could call it positivity cult stuff, I hear exactly what you're saying with that. People need to beware, because somebody can't lose their license who doesn't have one. Like a lot of the life coaches, they don't really owe you anything. If you buy what they're selling, literally, then you're at the mercy of whatever it is you get.
Yeah. Yeah, you are. And so buyer beware always. And Shay made a point. The opposite energy of those toxic, hardcore male guru grifters are exactly the same as the sweet femme versions. Yeah, and that's what I wrote about the alpha male, the alpha that acts like a beta male, and the covert narcissistic version of that. And that's exactly it. Those tend to be the gurus. They employ feminine traits to try to convince you that they're safe and soft and easy to talk to. Meanwhile, they're storing all your stories in their mind to later take you down if you step out of line, and they consider what the line is, not you. But you don't know it. You think you have this like amicable, equal relationship. Someone asked a question as well of, is therapy coaching? And I wanted to respond to that, but I'm wondering if you wanted to respond first, Jeremy, because I'm conscious of how much airtime I'm taking in this conversation.
But no, I'm really enjoying this. And, I want to do a one with you, live about men and narcissism, because I think we could do a really good one on that and bust a lot of myths on it. And I've had a lot of female clients who have seen the dark side of sisterhood, and I've learned a lot about that. And I've learned a lot about it from being a Southern male whose mom educated him in the ways of like, bless your heart, and what that really means. In a good way. Like, I know everything isn't what it seems. Is therapy coaching? Back in Clubhouse days, it was said lovingly. It was not with malice, but a coach said like, "Oh, therapists focus on your past and present, and coaches do your future." Well, actually, therapy covers past, present, and future if it's a good therapist. So that delineation doesn't really work for me. I would say coaching is not therapy. Like, life coaches do not have to be therapists. There are some therapists who dabble in coaching because you can do that across state lines, whereas with counseling, you can't. That's more complicated than I have to get. But the short answer, coaching is the key difference. Coaching is about helping people and them not having a diagnosis. If you're a coach, even if you're a therapist doing coaching, you do not diagnose someone with a mental health issue. That's a no-no. Coaching is for helping someone to move forward in life. And it's very much like the worried well. It's very much about, you're assuming the person doesn't need immediate psychiatric help. Therapy usually has more of a connotation of, even if you're not accepting insurance, you're diagnosing the person, and it's almost a medical thing. It's behavioral health. That's what it's called. So there's some similarities, but I could get so in the weeds on that, it's not useful. So I'll throw it back to you on that one. I don't want to get on my soapbox there.
Yeah. So they are different. There are overlapping skills and techniques that are necessary for both a therapist and a coach, but a therapist draws on very specific frameworks and practices that a coach wouldn't, because a coach is not therapy. So coaching is about creating habits. It is about behavior. There is obviously the thinking and feeling processing that is the changes that are required in perception in order to create a new behavior or different behavior. So it is about change and working towards achieving very specific things, whereas therapy is not always very specific about what where you're going with a client, because it's different. Like, if I want to lose 10 kilos, 5 kilos, there are very specific things that I'm going to need to do that is going to require some monitoring and adjustment along the way based on the changes that are occurring as a result of me implementing those strategies. So that's very specific. So that's around your fitness or your body. What I do, the coaching, is about behavioral change around responding to people where you're in a situation and you are not the dominant one and someone else is kind of controlling the situation, and you're finding that your life is, you're having a hard time because it's not just in one relationship. You're realizing that it's across a number of relationships and how that might have been established in your past. So we do go into past, depending on the coach. I go into past, but we're not driving. We're not like, I'm not doing any, therapeutic things. The experience can feel therapeutic, but we're not driving into, and how did that make you feel? Or how, not doing that. We're just like, okay, here's a way of thinking about your relationship with that person. And how is that related to what you're experiencing now with that person? Okay, so you can see a parallel. All right. So what is happening? We're drilling down the moment. What's happening for you when someone says X to you, or when they're, responding to something, or your assertiveness in that moment. So what happens? So I analyze what's happening in real time around an interaction. How's this person contributing to their suffering without realizing it, without, also shaming them? What are you doing? What's the thinking or the beliefs you have around doing it that way? We don't necessarily go, okay, where did that come from? Like, we don't care. We're thinking about the present, what's going on, and what's the thing now that you might do differently to have a different outcome. So it's about change, and very specific change. That's how I work. But, again, there's no regulation around coaching, who could call themselves a coach and all that stuff. And then, there's like the team coaches for, sport, that sort of thing. So coaches have different function, but overall, I see it more as facilitating change. So I'm a facilitator of change in someone's life that involves change in perception, change in emotional responses, change in behavior.
Wow. I love that. And I would double down on that. Not to get too controversial, but I dig your approach. I think I would refer people to you potentially more than many therapists. Because you developed a skill set and a conceptual lens that's very accurate for how human nature functions. And so it's tough. This is not an easy answer, but I think if people want to work with coaches, they really need to see if that person's life narrative of how they think pathology develops or whatever terms you can use in coaching, how problems develop and are resolved. If that seems accurate to how you experience the world, then great. If it seems like something's missing or confusing, or it's a very flimsy model that seems to be mostly about like prosperity gospel without the religion attached, which is a big thing, like just manifest, like, I wouldn't encourage that so much, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah. And coaches, so, because I've been trained in a number of things. So someone said, why would you coach if you're a doctor? I'm not sure if that's aimed at me or like a hypothetical, like medical doctor. So personally, I'm not, my doctorate was in research in biology and cancer biology. So that doesn't make me a coach. I've done training in mediation, so alternative, dispute resolution, but it's a process of helping people negotiate change in their relational dynamic where there's conflict, coming into an agreement of how they will proceed together so that they're no longer in conflict and they can work together, as well as facilitator training in a specific approach that draws on Carl Rogers, Egan's work. Oh my God, personal construct theory, ecological models. So lots of theories. Again, we have supervision model. We have to be supervised. I'm a supervisor, and I've done some, well-being coaching training. I've done a number of things, as well as healing work that, come together. So everyone has their different approach to coaching, but I like knowing that I'm drawing on theoretical frameworks as well as evidence-based of a reflective practice approach. That's how I do my coaching, through a reflective practice approach that spends more time on the change part. So planning for change, and how will we monitor it? How will we know that you've achieved that outcome? So what are the things that are barriers? What are you expecting to see as your outcome? What if you get different outcomes? How will you manage that? Like really helping people see in real time what will happen if you implement this one action. What do you think will happen? What are you hoping will happen? How you respond if that doesn't happen and X other thing happens? What are the possible things that can happen? How will we prepare you for those things? So that takes a lot of skill, because you have to be very curious and not just go, okay, the strategy you need to do. Great. See you next time. No, you want to set people up for success. And that's very different to therapy. And that's very different to a medical doctor. They don't necessarily do that stuff unless they're specifically trained to do it. And that's not part of a medical school curriculum, as far as I've learned. So yeah, you need that specific skill set. So yes, I do coach. And it's very different to being a research doctor or someone who studied psychology or studied, as a doctorate in clinical psychology or doctorate or whatever. Unless they've done specific coaching training as part of their study, they're just studying people. They're just studying human behavior condition. Doesn't equip them with the skill set that I've just described to do what I've just described, that holds people through a process of change, because change is bloody scary for everyone. And going against your inbuilt programs and your conditioning to do something that will inevitably have some backlash or some reaction, and to be able to hold yourself through that, it requires someone who's skilled to do it. And therapists aren't trained in that. Although some therapists step out of line and give advice of what a person should do in a situation and don't consider the repercussions. So they set their clients up for failure. And, medically trained people or nurses are not trained in that either, unless they've done it naturally as part of their foundation training. It's unless they've done that specifically and they've been implementing them in their practice with supervision. I get on my high horse about it. I'm very passionate about it because coaching gets a bad rap because I said everyone feels like they could do it or they've done this thing and now I'm coaching. Like, no, you need to be trained just like every other thing to facilitate the changes that you're hoping, that you're wanting them and they're wanting to achieve.
Yes, I absolutely love that. I would say to that, you really have to look at what someone's credentials are. I'm not going to add much more on than what you said. Just like how a couples therapist, if you go to someone, they need to be trained in a kind of work like Gottman, where you look at what's contributing to a relationship's success or failure from both sides. What are the solid factors like conflict, like we would say contempt, criticism, defensiveness, and stonewalling, which is just like turning away and refusing to talk. Really getting into terms and models like what you do with your liberation model. And I would just say, people don't know what they don't know. And the problem is, and I could do a live stream about this for a long time, or excuse me, for like regularly, I could do one about what to look for in therapy, because people just get the wind knocked out of them when they go to someone who just isn't a good fit, but doesn't let them know they're not a good fit. It's like, they're not going to tell you that. And it's bad therapy's worse than no therapy, really, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think so.
It sticks in the person's mind.
Yeah. Yeah. It could entrench certain things, certain thinking, that,
Absolutely.
yeah, keep them stuck. Yeah. There's just so many ways to help a person. And yet you're walking through a minefield trying to find the, credible or at least the rigorous practitioners. So, why would you go to a therapist? Because a therapist who is, officially trained, credentialed, have a number of frameworks and models that they work with. So the therapist can reflect on their own practice and refer back to those frameworks so they can see, I'm effective because I am applying this knowledge base in a very specific way with this client, and it's resulting in X change. And that change seems to be beneficial for that client. So I'm able to go back onto, and refer back to these different frameworks, especially when you're having supervision, because you're supposed to be drawing on these things, various forms of evidence that underpin your practice so that you can go, what's not working? I'm experiencing this client. I don't know if for some reason, they're saying yes to me, that, we go through this whole process to build a whole, strategic framework or, a plan that they're going to implement. We go through it in the session. They talk me through how they're going to do it. It's clear that they understand what they need to do. But every time they come back, they haven't done it. And I don't understand what's going on. So I need somebody, a third eye, an outsider, my supervisor or a peer supervisor, to help me think about my practice. What am I doing? What am I thinking that is contributing to this outcome? Is it me, or is there something going on there that I don't know about? But I have to look at my contribution and my responsibility to this situation that is a barrier to this person getting change. And I can't do that if I have nothing to reference to. I need to go back to the frameworks that I draw on so that I can go, I've been interpreting this way, when actually I can interpret it this way And I'm going to now try this in my practice with this person and then see what happens. So I know exactly what I need to change, and therefore I can monitor it and see its effectiveness or not. But a lot of people aren't doing this, self-described coaches who's supervising. Who do they have as their third eye or their outside eye or their critical friend to help them reflect on their practice? Therapists, they have to. My understanding is you have to have clinical or reflective supervision. It's inbuilt. You need it for your professional development, advancement, and that sort of thing. But there's
You did.
who claim to have supervision, but they have, say, the activist supervisors. And so all it is transmitting the, ideologies through supervision rather than looking at the practice and, using the models to help somebody improve their approach. So, because there's some people like, yeah, I get supervision. And I'm like, I would never see you as a therapist because I just red flag city with your approach and how you see things and how you talk about your clients. How is a supervisor picking up on that? What are you doing in your practice with the supervisor that isn't being flagged as an issue?
Yeah. I would say this. As therapists, we do have to do quite a bit of supervision. And I would say it usually involves, is it ever enough? So when we say supervision, it's weird because you think that it's supervising while someone's offering something. And it's really not. It's more you come monthly or every other week and you talk about your cases and you get some really good, really solid wisdom on that. Kind of like if you took what happens in those Substack posts where the person benefits from telling a client's story and profiting of it, but instead of that, you're actually secretly telling the client's story to supervisor and learning better how you can serve that client from someone who has years more experience than you. So it's kind of a reverse. That person may profit and they're having their story told by having someone who has way more tools say, here's what you need to give that person. So that's the ideal.
Yeah.
Is that always what happens? No. Is there always the best supervisor fit for the supervisee who maybe wants to go one direction instead of another? Probably not.
Yeah. Yeah. It's another relationship that has to form, and some forms of supervision is hierarchical. My form of supervision is not. And we both have something to learn from each other. And it mirrors the practice that I use with coaching, which is a partnership. I have things, you have things, together let's combine, but you're looking for something specific from me. I'm not going to go, you have all the answers. No, you don't, because you're coming to me, but I don't have answers yet because I don't have, I don't know anything. It will emerge through this partnership process. So it's the same thing with supervision, but it's, a different purpose because it's helping both of us learn. And, the supervisor is also reflecting on their own practice as they're supporting the reflective supervision process. And again, we're drawing on frameworks, and we're also looking at the functions. So the functions of supervision to make sure that we're covering all the functions, and place for feedback as well about the experience of supervision with them, so that they're learning about my experience of them as supervisors and what's working well and what might we do differently next time. So it's a very collaborative process. You have to feel secure in yourself because you might hear things from your supervisee that you didn't think were there, you didn't realize was maybe a barrier, an issue to connecting or being effective, and you can't use it against them, especially if your supervisee, even, especially if you're a supervisor and their manager, like, for example. So you have to, have good ego management when you're in that situation. It's the same with working with a client. You're going to get some feedback. You need to make sure that you're not going to be vindictive with how you use that feedback after. You might go, I'm so grateful. Thank you so much that you felt, courageous enough to give me that feedback. Like, why do they need courage? If we have a partnership, then it's just information that I need to hear. And if we have a respectful relationship, that the way they deliver the feedback will be respectful and in the spirit of helping me to learn about the effectiveness of my work and how I might improve. So it really takes away the power imbalance. We're learning together, and through this process of helping. So that's the approach that I like. Everyone works differently, but I found that to be the most fulfilling because it helps me. It helps me also, again, shed this expert that has been conditioned into me, that I have expertise, the other has expertise in whatever their expertise is in. And somehow we can use all of that together to create better change or better outcome.
Yeah, I love that. My gosh. So you do have to be aware of feedback, and it's not always going to be pleasant. I think most therapists would do really well to learn that fast and early, like failing fast and early. So that's kind of like a business model that some people will have. Like, don't
Yeah.
assume that when you iterate on a product, you're going to have to do that. Obviously, you're going to be trying as hard as you can, but being aware you're going to make mistakes and just take that as part of the process, and not that the client's not fitting into your box. Because then what happens is it's like, oh, well, I know all these techniques and they didn't respond well to that. That's
Yeah.
embarrassing. That's their fault. And it's that anger gets kind of nicked and activated.
Yeah. And again, if you're dependent on your income to come from, the source of your income are these clients, then you're going to have a business model that is more inclined to keeping your profits going versus the model that I'm talking about, which not everyone's open. Some people just want the expert. Some people, so I'm cautious about who I work with because of that. They're not going to get the advice and things like that. They're going to get other things. But it's less profitable than, a model where people need to trust me as the expert in order to keep coming back to me. And they're okay with this power imbalance or whatever, a differential, because that's what they think they need. So I'm going to keep using that approach because it's more profitable than other things that I've seen. And it's not necessarily bad. It's, as long as you're effective using that trust in your authority to help them and not take advantage of them, that's cool in my eyes. Yeah. Anyway, I think it's late for you.
Well, yeah. And I think that's a good stopping off point. I could go off on more tangents. So maybe save it. Because what happens on here is it saves everything and you can run it through and make a transcript.
Yes. So it's going to be a long one. Thanks, everyone, for coming.
So pleased to meet so many new friends here.
Yeah. And it was great, Jeremy, because it's been a while since. So I think we've just had so much pent up and it just went blah. So maybe next time we'll be a little more contained.
I will work on that too, but I love it. All right.
Thanks.
This is great. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for asking me.
See you later. Bye.